So I got this letter and I started reading through the letter. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to sue us. These people are going to sue us. It's from a rural fire department in Colorado. In the letter, they said, we're tired of fighting your fires. You've ruined all kinds of our equipment, and we're done with you. And I thought, oh my gosh, can they say that? Hey, my name is Brad. Back in the 90s, I worked as a CAD operator, a computer-aided draftsman, for the finance department at the BNSF. And you might say, the finance department? Why would a finance department need a CAD operator? I'm so glad you asked. So here's the story. Back in the early 90s, I was a college student, and my friend Steve Priest came to me, and he said, hey, Brad, the Santa Fe is looking for a couple interns to work with their newly scanned maps. And I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds fantastic. I want to do that. Well, Steve and I go way back. We've known each other since we were sophomores in high school. So that's about like a little over 40 years right now, which is quite funny to think about anyway. So he came to me and said, hey, there's this opportunity. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great to me. I'd like to do that. So apparently the Santa Fe, a few years prior, had scanned all of their system maps. So they had right-of-way maps and station maps, and they sent their employees out to the division offices and scanned all these maps. Well, now that all of these maps were in the mainframe, someone had to do something with them, and that's where we came in. And so Steve and I went there, and basically what we did is we opened up every single map, and you should have seen the book. There was a book about a 3-ring binder, like 3 inches thick, of just single-spaced type names for these maps. So we had thousands and thousands of maps to go through. It was crazy. And so the Santa Fe at the time, they did not have enough computer space for us. So Steve and I worked in the evenings, like 4 o'clock to midnight or so, and we'd open each one of these maps. And our job was to put title blocks and borders around all of these maps because they were just raw raster images. And if you've ever looked at like a bitmap real close up, you see just speckles and dirt all over the place. So we would open up these maps and we would despeckle them, and sometimes they were oriented the wrong way, so we'd have to flip them upside down. But some of these maps were so big that it'd take 15 minutes to flip the map. You know, you'd set the computer on flip and walk away, and 15 minutes later it would be done with its job. So it took a while to rotate these maps, put the borders on, and so consequently we had work for years. Probably somewhere around year 2, and this was down at the Argentine office down in Kansas City, Kansas. And somewhere around year 2, Steve got hired by the railroad directly, and so he was gone, and that left me and just a couple other consultants. At the time we were tasked with this, we were interns, but the railroad, after a period of time, I think they realized it was going to take a long time to get all these maps done, and so they made us consultants, which was really cool. So Steve was gone. He went to work for the engineering department somewhere with the geometry car, and I was still there flipping these maps and putting title blocks and borders on all of them. That's just kind of the background of where I was here. And after that project was done, I went on to work with track charts. The Santa Fe came up with a new track chart system, and I worked on that project, which was really cool. And then I worked on a click book project, which a click book is like a car location identification book. And the engine crew would have these books with them, and they could see how many cars they could spot on this particular sidetrack or this industry. And that was pretty cool too. And then I went on to work, believe it or not, on the geometry car data file, which if you've seen Steve's video about the geo car, it's a really good video to watch. But I was working on the data file for the geometry car, and I spent hours and hours and hours just typing numbers. I was really good at typing numbers because if you know anything about the railroad, everything is based on the engineering station, not necessarily the milepost. So when a subdivision would begin, it would start at engineering station 0 or 0 feet. And then as long as the subdivision was, the feet would just continue to build up, and you'd come to engineering station 100, 200, 300, 400, and they'd get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I spent many an hour typing many numbers. So I was pretty good at that. And well, this is probably, 3.5 years into this. I had worked as a consultant there in the Maps and Records department. And I had finally flipped over to days. They had enough computers to get all of us consultants sitting in a sea of cubicles and just working on our various projects. One day, my railroad boss, his name was Dennis, and shout out to Dennis. Dennis, you're a fantastic guy if you ever see this video. Dennis came to me once and he said, "Hey, Brad, there's a job that's going to open up that I think you need to apply for." And I said to Dennis, "What? I'm a consultant. I mean, why would they hire a consultant over a railroad person?" He said, "You need to apply." I'm like, okay, he must know something I don't know. I'm going to apply. So I applied for this job and I got it, which was fantastic. So what this job was previously in the Maps and Records department in Argentine, there was a man there, his name was Andy, and Andy, he would supply information to the property tax department. And that information came from the maps that had been scanned that Steve and I had rotated and put borders on. Well, Andy was about 10 minutes from retirement. He was just about to retire. And this was right during the merger with the BN and the Santa Fe. So things were kind of up in the air. Offices were scrambling what systems they were going to use. Was it going to be the Santa Fe system? Was it going to be the Burlington Northern system? Some combination of both. And so anyway, I was shoehorned right into that job, which was fantastic. And as soon as Andy retired, the Maps and Records department cut that position. They were no longer going to pay for that position. However, the property tax department picked that position up because they realized it was of great value to them and they didn't want to lose access to maps. And so I was hired by the property tax department, a division of the finance department. And so that's how a CAD operator got into the finance department. Really kind of odd. So Andy trained me. I think he trained me in Topeka. So I was in Topeka for about 2 months with Andy and went through some training. And he did things the old way. He had paper and he had notes and he had stacks and stacks and stacks of paper where he had written down engineering station 100 to 200 was the mosquito abatement jurisdiction in a certain town, in a certain county, in a state. I spent a lot of time computerizing all of those records, but it was a very interesting position. So as soon as Andy had trained me, I was moved to Schaumburg, Illinois. So I was in Illinois now with the property tax department. As a map guy, I was the map guy. And so what would happen is the tax agents that worked in the office would come to me and say, "Okay, Brad, we have to report mileage for Arizona, for California, for Utah, whatever it happened to be." The way the railroad paid their property taxes with some of the states was their value was determined by how many miles were in each state. So they would come to me and ask for this mileage and say, "Hey, it's time to report. I need to know how many miles of main line, how many miles of sidetrack are in, let's say, Arizona." And so I would go, what was really cool is I would go to the maps that I prepared for some user, and I became the user of those prepared maps, which I thought was that's really cool. I mean, that is full circle right there. And so anyway, they would come to me and say, "Hey, I need the miles for Arizona." And not only the miles for Arizona, it would be the miles for every county in Arizona that the railroad ran through. And then it was not only every county, it was every city in every county in the state. But not only every city, it was also every taxing jurisdiction that was associated with each of these cities, in each of these counties, in each of these states. So it was very laborious. If you like detail work, then it was great. If you don't like detail work, it would have been terrible. So anyway, I would report all of these. Some of the districts were really weird too. We had mosquito abatement districts. I mentioned cemetery district number 10, fire department district number 7, library districts. All of these jurisdictions would receive money when the state received the money from the railroads in the taxes. And so that was my daily operation in Schaumburg. And also I would get letters from lessees. Sometimes they would say, hey, we're leasing a piece of property and we got your tax bill. And so we would get the tax bill back and pay it. But then we would also have to allocate, well, how much land are you leasing from the railroad? And maybe it was a 40-acre plot and they were leasing 20. So I would send out a bill to them and say, well, you owe a balance of such and such. And there were some days when I would have to call county assessors or state assessors and dicker, haggle, and say, no, this property really isn't worth this much money. I mean, look at this property. It's got a broken down building. It's worth nothing, you know. And so there were all kinds of tax things going across my desk, anywhere from how much railroad was in this county to this farmer is leasing this property, how much should his tax bill be? So that was my daily operation. Okay, so one day my boss walks into me and he flips a letter on my desk and he says, Brad, I want you to see if you can take care of this. And I'm like, oh, that'll be easy, I'm sure, right? I'll just be looking up a tax bill or matching a parcel with some acreage or writing a legal description. I did that from time to time. But this one was different. So I got this letter and I started reading through the letter. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to sue us. These people are going to sue us. So I keep reading this letter. It's from a rural fire department in Colorado. And they said, in the letter, they said, we're tired of fighting your fires. You've ruined all kinds of our equipment. And we're done with you. And I thought, oh my gosh, can they say that? Because we pay them taxes. Can they really say that? I don't know. So, you know, my battle wasn't the legal issue. I thought, well, I want to see if I can maybe jump in here and solve this or at least hear what they're saying. So I looked up the roadmaster for that district and I called Roadmaster Bob. That's not his real name, but I said, hey, Bob, what about these fires? Are there fires going on the subdivision or what's happening here? And he's like, oh, yeah, it was a bridge fire. We don't exactly know what started it, but, you know, one of the bridges caught fire and the fire department came out, put out the fire. And I thought, well, that's simple enough. So then I had to make the call to the fire chief. This is the call I really didn't want to make, but I had the letter in my hand. So I called Fire Chief Bill, once again, not his real name. And I said, hey, Fire Chief Bill, what's going on? And oh my gosh, this guy lit me up like a Chinese firework, man. He was so mad. He was hopping. And I let him go for a while. I mean, he had to get it out, right? He had all kinds of steam built up and he had to let that pressure out. And I totally understand. I totally get it. So I listened to him talk and come to find out what had happened was there were a couple fires. I don't know if it was the same bridge or several different bridges on this subdivision, and they had gone out and put these fires out, which was fine. But in so doing, their uniforms were ruined because these bridges had creosote in the ties, and this creosote tar was everywhere. It got on their boots and their gloves, all their equipment, fire hoses, fire suits, and of course they didn't have any money, you know, to buy that kind of stuff. They were volunteer. Most of the people there were volunteers. And he was very upset, and he was sure he was not going to fight another railroad fire on that subdivision. And I listened to him, and I thought, you know, I've got an idea. What if, I said to Fireman Bill, I'm like, what if the railroad would make a little donation to your cause? Would you call off the dogs? And he's like, you know what? Map guy Brad, that's a good idea. I said, great, let me make some calls. So I called Roadmaster Bob up again and I said, hey, Roadmaster Bob, I've got this idea. What if we donated some money to this rural fire department so they could buy some new uniforms or some new outfits, gear? And he said, that's a great idea, but I don't have the strings. I can't do that. I don't have the authority to do that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay. So I'll make another few calls. So we got in touch with the finance department at the railroad, and they said, you know what, that's a great idea. We're going to do that. So that was the day that I earned my Railroad Negotiator Merit Badge.